In a world where money speaks louder than talent, Ethan Parker, a poor boy from a broken home, fights to prove that his worth isn't defined by his circumstances. Will he ever be seen for who he truly is? Or will society's judgments trap him in the shadows forever? Ethan Parker sat on the edge of his small bed, the dim light flickering above him in the cramped apartment. The walls were thin, the air stale, and the noise from the street never seemed to stop. His mother, Mary, worked tirelessly, cleaning buildings to make ends meet. Their apartment, dark and filled with the scent of old furniture, never seemed to have enough space, enough light, or enough hope. Ethan looked around, taking in the worn-out table, the half-empty fridge, and the small stack of books on his desk. He knew the world saw him differently through the eyes of poverty. At school, he was just another kid from the wrong side of town. His classmates, with their new clothes and shiny gadgets, never noticed him. To them, he was invisible, and even when he did well in class, the praise was never enough to lift him out of the shadows. He had talent, a sharp mind that could unravel complex problems in math. But no one seemed to care. No one cared about the late nights he spent studying in the dark, or the way his heart raced when he solved a tough equation. All they saw was a kid who didn't belong, whose family couldn't afford to give him the same things others had. Ethan felt trapped in a world that judged him before he had the chance to prove himself. He felt like he didn't belong, but deep down, there was a quiet determination. A spark of hope that told him one day he would show them. The old classroom felt heavy with the weight of expectations. Its high ceilings and dark wooden beams seemed to echo the silent tension that filled the air. Rows of students sat at their desks, faces contorted with concentration. The chalkboard at the front of the room was filled with a complex math problem, a puzzle that seemed unsolvable to most. The teacher, Mr. Harris, stood at the front, his arms folded as he watched the students struggle. Ethan sat in the back corner, his eyes fixed on the problem. The bright sunlight streaming through the windows barely touched the desks, and the air felt thick, like the room itself was holding its breath. He could feel the weight of the eyes around him, even though no one was looking directly at him. The murmurs and shuffling of papers from the other students filled his ears, but his focus never wavered. His mind raced through the equations, each number and variable clicking into place like pieces of a puzzle. But there was something else there, too. A feeling that he didn't belong. As he glanced around, he saw his classmates hunched over their papers, their brows furrowed in frustration. Some of them, the ones with the latest gadgets, whispered to each other, passing notes and rolling their eyes. Ethan felt a pang of doubt. No one believed in him. Not really. The whispers weren't directed at him, but he could feel them feel the judgment. He was just the poor kid who didn't belong in this world. Every glance, every quiet chuckle, felt like a reminder of his place. The whispers grew louder in his head. You're not smart enough. You don't belong here. You'll never make it. But then, something shifted. Ethan's fingers tightened around the pencil in his hand, the sharp tip digging into the paper. He was tired of being overlooked, tired of being dismissed. His mind had already found the solution. He just had to trust it. He stared at the problem on the board, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The murmurs, the looks, the judgment, they didn't matter anymore. With a deep breath, Ethan began to write down his solution. The numbers started flowing effortlessly, his hand moving quickly across the paper. He knew this problem. It was simple, really, once you understood how to approach it. His confidence began to build as he worked through each step, the earlier confusion lifting, replaced by a growing certainty. The other students were still struggling, some erasing mistakes, others staring blankly at their papers. Ethan's eyes darted between the equations on the board and his own work, feeling a surge of excitement. I can do this, he thought. I'm not stupid. I'm just different. I can solve this, he quickly finished, his hand stopping only when he reached the final answer. For a moment, he just stared at his work, the weight of the world lifting off his shoulders. He had done it. In that instant, Ethan realized something. He wasn't just solving a math problem. He was proving to himself that he could rise above the doubts, above the whispers. But then came the moment of hesitation. Should he raise his hand? Should he show Mr. Harris the answer? What if he was wrong? What if it wasn't good enough? Ethan's heart raced in his chest, the familiar feeling of insecurity creeping back. He looked around, catching a glimpse of the students near him. They were still tangled in their own confusion, and for a moment, Ethan doubted himself again. But then, he remembered something his mother had said to him countless times. Don't let anyone tell you what you're capable of. You decide that. Her words echoed in his mind, pushing him forward. Ethan raised his hand, the trembling uncertainty still there, but the confidence he'd found in himself growing stronger. Mr. Harris, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I think I have the answer. Mr. Harris looked at him with mild surprise, then walked over slowly. The room fell silent as the teacher examined Ethan's paper. The air seemed to hold its breath as Mr. Harris glanced back at the board, then at Ethan's solution. For a brief moment, it felt like the entire world was waiting. That's correct, Ethan, Mr. Harris said, his voice soft but clear. Well done. The words hit Ethan like a wave, washing away the tension in his chest. His heart raced in disbelief, then swelled with pride. For the first time, he had done something no one expected. No one but him. His classmates, who had been whispering and glancing at him earlier, fell silent. Some of them looked at him with surprise, others with envy, but Ethan didn't care. The recognition wasn't for them, it was for him. In that moment, as he stood there, feeling the weight of their gazes, Ethan realized that this was only the beginning. He wasn't just solving math problems, he was breaking through the barriers that had held him back for so long. He was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could change how the world saw him. The small apartment was quiet, save for the soft ticking of an old clock on the wall. Ethan sat hunched over his small desk, his face illuminated by the flickering glow of an oil lamp. The light was weak, casting long shadows across the room. But to Ethan, it felt like the only beacon of hope in his otherwise dark world. Outside, the sounds of the city honking horns, shouting voices faded into the background as he focused on the pages in front of him. The world outside no longer mattered. He opened his math textbook, the pages worn and faded from years of use, and set his pencil on the paper. The equations stared back at him complex, daunting, and seemingly impossible. Yet, Ethan didn't hesitate. He had faced these challenges before. But tonight, something felt different. There was a fire inside him, one that had been slowly growing with each problem he solved. Tonight, he wasn't just doing homework. He was proving something to himself. Ethan glanced at the clock. 11:30 p.m. His mother had long since gone to bed, exhausted from another day of work. She always told him to rest. But he couldn't. Resting meant giving in to the reality he wanted to escape from, the life that constantly tried to drag him down. He had to keep pushing, even if it meant staying up late, even if it meant battling exhaustion. He had to prove that he was more than what people thought of him, more than what the world expected of him. The first equation was a challenge, but not impossible. He scribbled out some rough notes, thinking through each step carefully. His pencil moved quickly, almost instinctively. The tension in his shoulders started to ease as the numbers began to make sense. With each line he wrote, a small thrill coursed through his veins. The puzzle was coming together. Slowly, steadily, he solved it. He leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath for a moment. It was just him and the quiet of the room. A wave of satisfaction washed over him, but it didn't last long. There was more work to do, more problems to solve. Ethan turned the page and faced the next challenge, a word problem that seemed impossible at first glance. His eyes skimmed the words, the numbers, the symbols, all blending together in a confusing mess. He felt the familiar weight of doubt settle in his chest. Can I do this? For a moment, he thought about quitting. It would be easier than sitting in this dim room, fighting against the fatigue, trying to prove something that no one cared about. But then he thought of his mother, working tirelessly every day to make sure he had a future. She believes in me, he thought. I can't quit now. With a renewed determination, Ethan began again. This time, he didn't rush. He focused on every detail, breaking down the problem step by step. The numbers clicked in his mind, slowly, methodically. The answer emerged. There was no magic to it, just persistence. He solved it. Another small victory, but with each victory came a feeling of exhaustion. His eyes were sore from staring at the paper for hours, and his body ached from sitting in the same position for too long. He felt the weight of the night settling in, but he didn't let it stop him. Just one more, he told himself, one more problem. One more step toward proving that he could make it. As the hours passed, Ethan worked through problem after problem. The glow of the oil lamp grew dimmer, but his resolve burned brighter. There was a growing sense of something deeper within him, a strength that had been there all along but had remained hidden, buried beneath the weight of his doubts and insecurities. With each equation he solved, it became clearer. He was capable. He could do this. By the time the first light of dawn began to seep through the cracks in the curtains, Ethan had finished his work. His body was tired, but his mind was sharp. His spirit alive with a sense of pride he hadn't felt before. He stood up, stretching his stiff muscles, and looked at his work. The problems that had seemed impossible just hours before were now solved. He had done it. And for the first time, Ethan felt the weight of his struggles lift, if only for a moment. He was not just a poor kid from a broken home. He was a fighter, a problem solver. Someone who would not back down in the face of adversity. As the sun rose higher, Ethan smiled to himself. This was just the beginning. The gymnasium was buzzing with excitement. Rows of students sat on bleachers, their eyes locked on the stage at the front of the room. The tension was palpable, almost suffocating. Today was the day of the school's annual intellectual competition, and the stakes were higher than ever. Students from the brightest academic circles, some with medals and awards already under their belts, gathered around, eager to showcase their skills. But what made this year's competition different was the presence of a special guest. The CEO of a prestigious tech company, someone whose name echoed in the halls of the business world, had come to witness the event. This wasn't just any ordinary competition. It was a test, a challenge, and the eyes of not only the school but the business world were on these students. Ethan stood backstage, his heart pounding in his chest. His palms were slick with sweat, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? The self-doubt crept in, threatening to overwhelm him. He could hear the whispers of his classmates, their quiet chuckles at his expense, and the doubt in the back of his mind tried to push him into the shadows. But then he remembered the late nights, the hours spent hunched over his desk, working through complex problems, finding his own strength in the quiet darkness. He thought of his mother's tired eyes, always supporting him, and her words echoing in his mind. Don't let anyone tell you what you're capable of. You decide that. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was it. This was his moment, as the announcer's voice boomed through the microphone, calling the participants to the stage. Ethan's legs felt heavy, but he stepped forward, walking toward the spotlight. The eyes of every student in the room followed him. They knew who he was, the quiet, overlooked kid from the back of the classroom. But today would be different. Ethan stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces in the front row. The CEO sat, watching intently, waiting for the students to perform. The challenge was clear. Solve a series of high-level mathematical and logical problems in front of everyone. The pressure was overwhelming. But Ethan's focus sharpened. He wasn't thinking about the audience, the whispers, or the judgment. He was thinking about the numbers, the problem in front of him, and the opportunity to prove himself. The first question flashed on the screen, and Ethan's heart skipped a beat. It was a complicated problem involving advanced calculus and algebra, a challenge that many of his classmates had been talking about for weeks, struggling to even understand the concepts behind it. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the pen, but he refused to let fear control him. He took a deep breath, his mind settling. The problem was long, the equations complex. But they weren't insurmountable. One by one, he broke down the problem into smaller parts. Solving each segment methodically, the room was eerily silent, all attention focused on him. But Ethan was lost in the numbers. In the rhythm of the solution, he solved the first problem in record time. And with each correct answer, his confidence grew. The second question came, and it was even more challenging than the first. For a brief moment, Ethan hesitated. The pressure mounted, and doubt flickered in his mind. Can I really do this? But then he remembered. He remembered the countless hours of practice, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt that he had overcome. This wasn't just about solving math problems. This was about proving that his worth wasn't defined by his background or his circumstances. This was about showing that talent, determination, and perseverance could break through any barrier. With renewed determination, he dived into the next question. His hand moved with precision, the solution unfolding in his mind like a map guiding him through uncharted territory. The clock ticked down, but he was in the zone, focused entirely on the task at hand. Finally, the last problem. Ethan's eyes scanned the screen, taking in the complex web of numbers and variables. This one would require every bit of focus he had. But he knew he could do it. His pencil danced across the paper, solving the problem step by step. When he finished, he sat back, his heart still pounding, but a sense of quiet pride settling in his chest. He had done it. The room remained silent for a moment, and then, like a wave breaking, the applause started, first softly, then growing louder. Ethan's eyes widened, and he looked around. Surprised by the recognition, his classmates, once skeptical, were now looking at him with admiration. Even the CEO was clapping, a smile on his face. Ethan stood there, feeling a rush of emotion. He had done it. Not for them, not for the recognition, but for himself. This moment was his, and for the first time, he truly believed that talent could break through any barrier. The classroom was quieter than usual as Ethan walked in. The murmurs that had once surrounded him now seemed distant, replaced by a new energy. His classmates no longer looked at him with the same dismissive glances. They weren't whispering behind his back or laughing at his worn-out shoes. Instead, there was a shift, a sense of respect, a sense of recognition that hadn't been there before. Ethan sat down at his usual spot in the back of the room. But this time, the seat felt different. It wasn't just his physical position that had changed, it was his place in the classroom. He felt it. The eyes of his peers were no longer filled with judgment, but with admiration. The whispers he had once feared were now replaced with nods of approval and friendly smiles. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel like the poor kid in the class. He felt like Ethan Parker, the student who had just proven that his worth wasn't tied to his background or his circumstances. He had risen above the expectations others had set for him, and he could feel that shift in the way they saw him. It was subtle at first a glance, a small smile from a classmate, a respectful silence when he spoke, but it was there. Later that day, the class gathered for a group meeting, and for the first time, Ethan was included in the conversation. His classmates no longer saw him as an outsider. They asked for his opinion on an upcoming project. And even Mr. Harris, who had once overlooked him, turned to him for advice. Ethan's heart swelled with pride. He hadn't just passed a test. He had earned their respect. But there was still something else in the air, something deeper than the recognition he was now receiving. It was a sense of responsibility. A quiet realization that this wasn't the end of his journey. It was just the beginning. As he walked out of the classroom later that day, Ethan couldn't help but think about everything he had overcome. The late nights, the doubt, the whispers, and the judgment he had pushed through it all. But now, he understood that the real victory wasn't just in solving the problems on the board. It was in breaking down the barriers that had been built around him. It was in proving that his talent, his intellect, wasn't something that could be measured by his family's income or his clothes or the neighborhood he lived in. Ethan's gaze shifted to the students walking beside him. They weren't looking down at him anymore. They were looking at him as an equal. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel invisible. He felt seen, not just for his abilities, but for the person he had become. Yet, even in this moment of pride, Ethan knew that his journey wasn't finished. He had taken the first step toward changing the way people saw him, but there was still so much more to do. He hadn't just changed the way his classmates saw him, he had changed the way he saw himself. He had proved that no matter where you came from, you could rise above your circumstances if only you believed in yourself. But even more than that, Ethan realized that his success could be a beacon for others like him. Maybe, just maybe, he could help change how society viewed people from his background. Maybe, just maybe, his journey would inspire others to rise above their circumstances, to find their worth, and to break free from the judgments that had held them back for so long. As Ethan walked home that day, the sun setting behind him, he felt a sense of purpose, a fire inside him that was stronger than ever. This was just the beginning. The world had seen him for the first time, but he was just getting started, and he was determined to make sure that others would see their worth too. His journey was far from over. It had only just begun. The letter came on a crisp morning, sealed with the emblem of a prestigious school. Ethan's hands trembled as he opened it, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, it was written, "Congratulations, Issa Ethan Parker. You've been awarded a full scholarship." The words danced in front of his eyes. A scholarship. For the first time, it wasn't just a dream, it was real. Ethan stood at the window, staring out at the world beyond. This was more than just an academic achievement. It was a life-altering opportunity. He wasn't just a winner of a school competition. He had won his place in a world of possibilities. A new school, a new beginning. And with it came a weight of responsibility. He had fought for this. Every late night, every moment of doubt had led him to this point. And now, as he prepared to enter a new environment where the challenges would be greater and the stakes higher, Ethan felt a fire within him. He was no longer the overlooked, underestimated boy from a small apartment. He was someone who had the power to change his life and the lives of others. As he packed his bag, ready for the journey ahead, Ethan smiled. This was just the beginning. His story wasn't just for him. It was for anyone who ever felt invisible.